Good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Live with Dan today. We have a very special episode with Vivek Bhaskaran, Jamin Brazil, and Lenny Murphy joining me today for a panel discussion about ChatGPT. You know, it's amazing an AI engine brings us together for a real life conversation, So, guys, thanks for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
Honor.
Awesome. So I'm hoping you all have heard about ChatGPT. If you haven't, you've probably been living under a rock, right? I mean, every time I turn on or I go to LinkedIn, it's ChatGPT this, and this. So I guess, let's kick it off. To establish kind of a baseline. Viv, what is ChatGPT?
Well, Sam created this amazing tool called OpenAI, and they kind of raised quite a bit. I mean, Microsoft put in $1 billion, and they kind of created this kind of generic AI engine. That's it, right? And then they exposed it through a chat interface. The OpenAI has been there for like a couple of years now, and then they exposed the OpenAI infrastructure through kind of an amazing chat interface where you can ask any questions and it'll come back with reasonably smart answers. Think of and you can ask it to do things. You can give it content and summarize content and do this almost like a personal assistant of sorts, personal research assistant of sorts, maybe. So that's kind of the interesting part about the tech itself, and so that's an amazing. I think it's an amazing innovation, obviously.
So the big difference behind it, if you think, is the engine that's running it. I mean, there's lots of chatbots out there, right? But it's the back end OpenAI that's
the OpenAI. OpenAI is exactly the engine behind that is OpenAI. I think tons of money has been poured into it, and a lot of smart people have obviously worked on the engine behind it to make it what it is today.
Got it. Makes sense. And then, Jamin, I had a question for you. Now, I was on LinkedIn, of course, reading about ChatGPT, and you had a comment that kind of struck me as really, interesting. You said that you think ChatGPT will have a bigger impact on how we gather and analyze consumer data in 2023 than the internet did from 1996 to 2006. That's a big statement. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I can't wait for my fellow panelists to disagree with me on this point. But having built careers all around, really that time period. But you think about the advantage that the internet provided consumer insights professionals, that was really just predominantly around speed. I mean, you could argue price maybe, but I really think it's the biggest benefit has been around speed and accessibility, but predominantly speed. And so, it used to be the case that we had to intercept people in malls in order to get them to complete a survey. And now we intercept them in their inboxes to functionally get the exact same thing done. And certainly in the time period that you referenced, early 2000s, surveys, online surveys, very much just were copy and pastes from whether they're phone interviews or mall intercepts. So there really wasn't anything unique about it except for the format of the place it was being done. And so, yeah, I think you fast forward to today, tomorrow, like yesterday. Let's say yesterday, like pre ChatGPT. So you look at our industry, and our industry is dealing with the same problems that we dealt with 20, 30 years ago. So, one of my clients or previous clients, they were doing a customer sat survey. They still are, presumably. That survey would get about 500 million completes a year. So a truckload of completes. There was an open-ended question. What were they doing with that open-ended question? I can tell you. They were randomly selecting by segment about 20 responses, and they were hand coding those, and they were saying these are relatively representative of the sentiment on the thing. So not particularly sophisticated. And still in our industry, one of the biggest points of waste is unstructured data in consumer insights. And so, and if you start decoupling that framework, you think about, well, what is an actual survey? And survey instrument is quite literally just a conversation at scale. Nobody speaks in Likert scales. We don't talk about, hey, on a 5-point scale, how much do you like your coffee? And instead we have a conversation about that. And so what this technology does is it enables us to actually have a conversation that we can then have a highlight reel created for us that is very actionable.
Got it. Lenny, I see you nodding your head. Do you want to add to that, or do you have any comments around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we look at to kind of build off of that, of Jamin's point, the internet enabled quantitative research to happen at scale, right? And Viv, you know that better than anybody. From the survey standpoint, but qual was really limited primarily because of the back end, because of the analytical aspect of it. It was still incredibly labor intensive, and technology like ChatGPT are changing that paradigm. And we have used this technology in the last 2 rounds of Grit, working with a text analytics provider called Yabble. So shout out, guys. And it's not just, there's 2 components. There's the text analytics component, which is fairly standard to kind of get to themes and clustering, et cetera, et cetera. But what blew me away early on in using this was the ability to interrogate the data, to ask for a summary, and it wrote a summary, and it was pretty damn good. So that was amazing. But even if take it a little bit further, we just experimented using this interface on basically a transcript from one of the podcasts we do. I did a podcast with Simon Jadwick, and we experimented with utilizing this to create a summary of that discussion. Was it filled with flowy, wonderful language? No. Was it accurate? Did it summarize the salient points and communicate that in a very workmanlike and professional way? Yeah, it did. Like there were a lot of expletives coming out of my mouth when I read it. Holy fill in the blank. So, and the opportunity there to decouple from the survey potentially, right? In some instances, but certainly to scale qualitative research, to scale discussions, to scale organic conversations with people now and to do that with thousands of people, not just a handful, and to efficiently process that on the back end to get the same efficiencies we get with creating tabs off of data within a survey platform. That is game changing. And the opportunity, if we combine that with other technologies that we've seen, and we'll use text analysis as an example, that get into emotional affect, right? Not just sentiment, but actually to try and understand the emotion and the states of mind that are occurring within that textual conversation, voice analytics, all of those things, the opportunity to really unlock immense value in conversations, whether it's via text or voice, is I think it's amazing. And I agree with you, Jamin. This will define a lot of the big companies over the course of the next few years that can tap into this and deploy that at scale. And I can tell you, clients want this. Clients, we're working with several on the Gen 2 side, working with several large research buyers right now on the future of their insights organization. And the ability to try and unlock qualitative insights at scale of unstructured data, regardless of the form factor, it doesn't matter whether it's video or text or voice, this is a huge priority for them. And they want to be able to deploy this because they see the value of understanding people at a deeper level than what a survey can deliver. So it's exciting times. It's also scary times. I mean, let's be real, right? I mean, again, that kind of holy expletive component, there is a piece of that you think, wow, I mean, this could replace researchers from a process standpoint. I don't think it's anywhere close to being able to replace the thinking and the overall analysis, but it can streamline a lot of jobs for a lot of people that traditionally have been part of kind of the back end field operations part of the research industry.
Right. Makes sense. Viv, what are your thoughts? I see.
For the record, I do have to disagree with Jamin. Like, it's not as big as the internet. Yes. Come on, dude. Like, okay, it's big, but the internet was fucking huge.
So we can drop F-bombs All right, man. Viv, you just all right. There we
You
go.
know it's gonna happen with Vivek, man. Every time.
I mean, come on.
One of those things.
You can't just say it's as big as the internet. Come on, internet, changed my life. Okay, so I don't know whether ChatGPT really changes my life. I mean, obviously, it's kind of like really enhances our lives for sure, but it does not. Like at that acceleration level, let's put it that way. So
Well,
no, but
could
in
it?
general, I mean, obviously, I'm disagreeing in terms of how big. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's big, but it's not as game changing as the internet at least in my mind, if you will. And then obviously, I think Lenny brought up like a super interesting point around like summarization, realistically, right? I mean, that's one of the. I mean, it does a lot of things, but at least that's one of the things that I feel at least is kind of at least massively like, from a productivity perspective, like you want to summarize anything, you have to, read an entire blog and then summarize it. Simple. When you read an entire set of reports and summarize it, which is kind of like, not necessarily super repetitive, but not super intellectual either, by the way. So it's kind of in between, right? Like, it's not like you're creating something brand new, but it's not like you're pushing buttons either. So kind of in the middle, realistically, if you think about it. So that's why that is the summarization construct is extremely like, from a productivity, like Lenny was saying, it's like it's a productivity booster. Like, look, you can summarize an entire, transcript, for example, or summarize an entire blog to, the five points realistically. So that I think is a true game changer, like that. That is like, game changer from a productivity perspective. So, and a lot of the, just stepping back from an AI perspective, I mean, obviously my background is in tech and software development. A lot of it like, oh yeah, we don't need software developers anymore because AI is going to write software. I'm like, not really. I don't know of any kind of practical real world, at least not yet, that like, look, you can think up of or you can mock up what a ScreenFlow should do, and then you got code that just, yes, there are code assists right now, same thing like summarization. There are code assist tools that say if you write the first 3 words, it'll write out the entire kind of component of write out the entire set of the components that you're writing. So those are they're all assists, and that's how I think the AI is gonna like really kind of like evolve, is really around like an assist model, right? You're trying to do something, and that's just gonna make help you do whatever you're trying to do at an exponentially faster scale.
Well, it's interesting. The Lukasz Paskapil, the managing director of GreenBook, has shared something internally that his kid's school, I guess they go to a kind of a specialty STEM kind of charter school in New Jersey, and they're already drawing the line. Said, okay, we see the benefits of utilizing this technology for these things, but you can't use it for tests. You can't use it for writing papers. You can't use it for doing, kind of real deliverables, which I just thought was interesting. That from an educational standpoint, I mean, my God, think about when I was in high school, I would have been all over this. I had to write an AP paper on Moby Dick, and oh my God, how awful that was to be able to. Anyway, sorry, I'll get back on the point. The implications on, and I think to your point, Viv, how do we put kind of walls around this on what are the use cases? Because there's a lot of use cases that could be kind of nefarious, and would be detrimental in lots of aspects of the world, not just within the research space. So I think that's going to be interesting as well.
I think Lenny's nodding to survey bots.
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. So to generate text for open-ended responses, yeah, absolutely. So
yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Lenny, because we sent out, of course, like an email blast for this particular discussion, and someone wrote back to me and said, "Wow, this is really current, because we're actually currently facing something like this." And this guy gave a big list of like different things that they were running into, but he said, aside from like the pattern responses, one of the biggest tells was that, respondents were writing in nice, complete sentences that were well thought out, and which obviously we know that doesn't happen all the time, right? So it definitely is a big challenge. I think with anything positive, there's always going to be that negative side. And I know, Viv, you pinged me early on and said, "Hey, we got to jump on this ChatGPT stuff." So what are some of those things, like there's positive, which we can talk more about, but some of the negative implications, like, the survey bots and open ends and things like that. But they're wanting to speak a little bit more to that point.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously that goes to data quality. Like survey bots and data quality are kind of like, I guess synonymous in our world realistically, and obviously, for every virus there's an antivirus, right? I mean, they like, so what we did was like we actually used ChatGPT back to determine whether you've used ChatGPT in our surveys effectively, right? So we basically said like, look, if you we added in a feature in the last week, literally, for our data quality product to determine if somebody is using ChatGPT to respond to an open-ended response realistically. So we do kind of pattern matching around it and say like, if you've used ChatGPT to respond to an open-ended comment, we will flag that response literally. So that is our kind of at least short-term solution right now to say like, look, if you're using our data quality filters and the data quality filter has an open-ended comment, and we basically ask ChatGPT, hey, how would you answer this question? So if somebody copies and pastes that from GPT back into us, then we will flag it automatically, really. So we are tracking that. So but again, I'd probably say it's a cat and mouse game to some extent in this particular game. I mean, it's been like that for virus and antivirus for a while to some extent. But so that's something that is, at least I'm excited that we are able to at least solve that problem. At least natively we are able to solve that problem, and that has been a fun learning exercise and fun execution exercise, at least in the last 2 weeks, really.
I mean, and a little plug. Sorry, Dan, but a little plug for QuestionPro. I mean, you guys have built a remarkably agile platform that has been, in my opinion, and as one of the competitors to you, has been a big influencer on where other platforms will wind up heading. So I definitely appreciate that point of view. I do have a question for you on that. I know it might be a little bit off target, but did you find that it was doing a good job of grading the outcomes? Were you getting a lot of false positives?
No, what we do is like when you add in a text comment box, we ask ChatGPT, what are the different ways you can answer the same question, right? 5 different ways of asking the same question. Then we look at the answers coming out of ChatGPT, and if there is any pattern matching between somebody's copying and pasting from there, so the pattern matching is a separate algorithm, is like, okay, we know that these are the possible list of 20 or 30 ways you would answer this from ChatGPT effectively, but by asking ChatGPT itself, really, right? So say if somebody, when you get the survey, and if you kind of like even change the question and ask ChatGPT that same question and copy and paste that answer, we will still catch it, really, right? So, and we want to put some threshold in, like, how much if you just copy the entire question, or if you copy the part of the response or the entire response. So we kind of came up with a threshold of about like 70 or 80%. If you're copied 70 or 80%, there's the same pattern matching, then we flag it, really, and that's a tweakable thing, really. So far, like we've kind of enabled it with a couple of. Obviously, we built this clearly in the last last week, literally. So I don't have a ton of data to say like how much have we stopped, how much have we stopped, but at least like we've enabled it with a few of our clients, and we are working through them, really, right? Like, okay, well, how many of these are being caught right now through the data quality data filters, and so we'll have some more data in literally a month or so to kind of like aggregated data, so we can confidently say like, well, we're catching 80% of the stuff, and whatever we were catching right now. So first part was to just build the system so that we can do the catches and start the monitoring in play. And then in 30 days I can tell you like what level of accuracy as well as what level of kind of importance we are catching in right now.
Would that become part of kind of the standard launch process? Kind of
yeah, it's part of our data quality. Yeah, exactly. Literally, it's part of the one of the things in data quality. Like, and we can obviously some customers want it, some customers may not want it. So it's part of the list of like 5 or 8 different triggers that we run for data quality. So it is the bot response is one of the triggers for data quality. Or 7 other triggers like speed lining, this, that, and all that stuff that we do. And then this is the 8th item, I guess. We just added that as an 8th item.
Well, no, I mean on the front end before you launch. So to kind of
it's a good point. So there is a separate project we are running, which is like help people design surveys, literally, right? Like create surveys, or kind of like, hey, look, I want to ask a few questions about, I don't know, is Lenny an amazing guy or not, whatever it is, right? So like how many different ways can you ask that question, right? I don't know, so. and how, or like, how many times will Jamin and I disagree on any conversation? Right? So that's like, so.
Those are softball questions, Viv. We need the,
Yeah,
Well,
I
the
know.
first
I know.
one's easy. I
I'm
mean,
buttering up.
Yeah,
I'm
the first
buttering
one's
up both
easy.
these guys. No, but
Yeah.
there's a real use case there. There's an actually real, like a very fantastical use case again around efficiency, right? Like there are a lot of people, especially for us, there are a lot of people who are non-researchers who use QuestionPro realistically, right? I mean, like, we sell to product managers, we sell to, like, folks who are like starting a company, for example. Say, hey, look, I have an idea, I want to start a company. Hey, but I want to do some research about this new, product I want to build. And so, and they're not researchers. Right? I mean, they're entrepreneurs. They're not guys. So how do you kind of help them? And typically, the notion was, I mean, they don't have the budget for going out and hiring an agency or going through a process like that. And I think those kind of people are going to get significantly impacted, as well as it'll help them really well. Say, like, look, I have this new product, I want to do a product innovation survey, or I want to do this, and then and then we are plugging into ChatGPT to get a list of questions around the product that you could ask around usability, around flexibility, around price testing, and all that stuff, and that comes back, and then we put that into the survey. So we can automatically create a survey in 22 seconds about a particular construct, about if we know some element about it. And actually, we are not doing something magical over there. We're just obviously using ChatGPT on the back end to kind of figure out what the questions and what the model should be, and then just streamlining that process of what are the options should be, and then just jam that into the survey automatically. So you just get a simple, open-ended text box. You say, like, I want to create a survey about this, and then boom, the survey is created around that right after that. So that's kind of the second part to this conversation, really. So that's that's a true. I also believe that that's a true kind of like efficiency accelerant, if you will.
Well, that brings up another question.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lenny.
Dan's got a whole thing.
Yeah, go, man, go.
No, go ahead, Lenny. Go ahead. I want to hear your question, so that's fine.
Well, just think about the implications for the skill set for the researcher of the future, for instance, right? I mean, so much of our history has been so process oriented, right? And we've seen this shift begin to occur based on technology to theoretically free us to be more thinkers. Now, I'll tell you, we just got data back from Grit, which thank you QuestionPro for hosting that. And we asked a question about the day in the life of a researcher. And we started asking that question, thinking that, oh yeah, we're going to start seeing people spending far more time with, consulting and analysis. Bullshit. That is not what's happened. What we've seen is that technology has expanded bandwidth for researchers. They're doing more of the same things. But this technology, and using your example, Viv, even from a design standpoint, right, and how to optimize on the design standpoint, and then certainly on the back end from an analytical perspective, would seem to suggest that this could help us get out of that paradigm. That's not just doing more because we have greater efficiency, but these technologies really could replace some of the functions of human researchers that are process oriented and position us more to be more creative thinkers and higher level skill sets. Or am I just full shit? Because I absolutely could be, because we haven't seen it happen yet. So what do you guys think?
I think you guys curse all the time.
It's bad. It brings it out in me.
I think that's me. I don't think Lenny normally curses.
I know.
Oh no, I do. I'd like to.
All three of us do. The only person that doesn't curse out here is Dan, and I'm on good behavior. Lenny, I don't think it changes anything for the next 10 years. And the reason why is because, we've seen massive productivity gains through digitization of research and getting to Vivek's point and pushing, disagreeing with me. And that's absolutely true. And yet, we still see the same proportion of time spent on those specific job functions in job. And so I think in a lot of ways, it's just like, if you think about an insights professional as being a cog, we all have different cog. are different cogs in this like machine of insights. And I just feel like the cog gets bigger as our expertise expands. To your point, though, I think it does create a lot of potential disruption in the job market for people that are not potentially, that are currently doing that thing, whether it's summarizing or first pass. I've launched 3 studies and 2 focus independent qualitative projects in the last week, and I've used ChatGPT as the creation of the discussion guides, initial discussion guides, and surveys, and it has been fantastic in all cases. And it's not the totality of it, but it probably saves me 80% of my time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. I think that's a good point. I think just because of you don't have to think about it. It gives you what you need, and then you can always add to it. I think Viv, you're about to say something, I think, as well.
No, I kind of, for a change, I'll actually agree with Jamin. Like, I mean, one of the things, like, when Jamin and I talked about HubUX, this was about a year ago, really, right? Like, a lot of time, anytime you're spending repetitive things, then that's just like, even today, a lot of repetitive kind of work is being done, like, like copy and paste, for example, right? Like just simple things like copy and paste. Like, why are we doing copy and paste? It's you're going to copy this and like, in doing that, or like finding respondents and doing, and that's what Jamin solved with HubUX, really, right? On the operations side, realistically, right? I think this is like a massive accelerant on the efficiency of operations, realistically, right? So I think so, and that's an exciting thing. I mean, there is an impact to job, really, in a different way. Like if you're doing something that is just kind of reasonably mundane, then you don't need to do that. I mean, that is completely gone, realistically, right? Same argument. Like I was talking to my managing director for Latin America, Andres, and he was like, content production, like talk about go away from research for a minute. For obviously we've all been through SEO and content production. Content production can be reasonably automated, realistically, right now today. Like and assuming content production still is relevant, realistically, right? So there's a lot of discussion around like, okay, the ChatGPT can create a lot of content, but then also the flip side to that discussion is like, can Google recognize that this ChatGPT produced content, and therefore your SEO strategy may not actually work really by producing ChatGPT based content. So the thesis is there, and the antithesis is also there, realistically. So nobody knows yet, right? I mean, like, let's say you produce an amazing blog, and Google says like, oh, cool, this is ChatGPT produced bot, so therefore we will downgrade that intrinsically. So that doesn't help you, actually, right? At the end of the day, like, assuming that you're trying to do it for SEO, let's assume that that's the premise, if you will, right? So there are a lot of, so it's kind of like we have to see how it plays out. Like there are a lot of things that are going to come out, but it may not actually be as amazing as you think, because the counterpoint may actually come into play, if you will.
Sure, like the issue with the bots, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we talked about a lot of positive implications in terms of maybe survey creation, also coding open end, summarization. Are there other like positive aspects of ChatGPT in relation to researchers that they maybe give them ideas or things that they could use ChatGPT for? I know, Jamin, you said discussion guides and things over the last couple of weeks has been very helpful. Are there other things outside of that you guys can think of that researchers should be thinking about in terms of ChatGPT in their day-to-day?
Yeah, for me, getting to Lenny's point before, it's really honing our skill around asking the right question and being able to iterate on that question until you get there. And so an example that I did literally just yesterday, and I'm going to fail on the exact words, but the gist of it was a survey on how people think about love today. And so I have a bunch of open-ended data, and I just paste that into my OpenAI and say, please summarize the key points. And then from there, it does a brilliant job of summarizing the key points, identifying and then summarizing those points. And then I ask it to rank order those points from most important to least important, et cetera, et cetera. And so, by as you kind of like iterate through with this functional research assistant, then you're able to get to something that's very rich, which then you can embed in your report and creates a much more compelling story than something like traditionally we might use a word cloud for this type of data and try to like hypothesize the why of it. But anyway, that's like another little hack that we can employ that whole process took me less than 10 minutes.
Right. And what would have taken you before, Jamin?
It would have been impossible to have done to quite literally.
Yeah,
I mean, it would have been too time intensive.
Yeah.
Right. Makes sense. Any other?
I think, Dan, we should get Lenny to publish a blog about all the different hacks for ChatGPT that researchers can do. Straight up, like these are important, like easy hacks for anybody. I mean, I learned this from even the moderation guide. I mean, it's a great example. Like, so these are all. You should just publish all the hacks that you can do with ChatGPT tomorrow, and then we already have 3 or 4 hacks right now that literally can save you 8 hours.
Let's transcribe this and use ChatGPT to summarize it, and we'll publish that.
That's funny. That's funny because Kelly Clifford, she said, can you provide a transcript for this? I'd love to throw it in ChatGPT and get all the key points to share with your team. So I think. No, Viv, I think that's coming in the next edition of the Experience Journal too. So, little preview there. So, what about
Sorry, real quick, because there's another piece of this that it's kind of obvious but we haven't mentioned, and that is, we've seen the explosion of knowledge management platforms in the industry as a distinct subsector.
Yep.
I mean, this. I don't know that I'd want to be the CEO of a knowledge management platform at this point when. And fundamentally, this technology does do that, right? And there's a whole secondary research is, a part of the research industry. Librarians are part of the research industry, at least tangentially, knowledge workers. And on that side of things, I mean, the implications for curating information, for curating, finding, summarizing information, regardless of form factor, is pretty astounding. I mean, it really does change things. Rather than spending, some of the knowledge management platforms are $1 million annual contracts, and they're basically taxonomies, right? You have to structure the data and you put it in. Theoretically, things like ChatGPT, they just do it. It just does it automatically. In so many ways, and can make that so easy, and with the ability to query the data, right? I mean, I think that the implications for every research organization, every buyer side organization says that they waste so much previous research. It just goes up on, into a folder and it just sits there. Companies like Lucy AI. I mean, they've been trying to make that a far more efficient process utilizing AI so that you can go through all of your historical data and find salient points. And we're there now, right? These technologies allow that.
What's really interesting for me, and I'd love to get Dan an affiliate link for QuestionPro after this so that I can get any sort of residual income.
Dude, you own 0.007% of QuestionPro. That's pretty good, right?
All right. So anyway, this is where you think about enterprise contracts with QuestionPro, and QuestionPro. I'm sure everybody that's listening to this has some level of visibility, but it was structured or is structured, very similar to my last company, and so in that framework, now all of a sudden you have this. You don't have to worry about creating commonality across projects. You can create discoverability, accessibility, and discoverability. Those are the two things. Just through the implementation of the technology inside of your install. And now all of a sudden I can say, in the last year, what do males age 18 to 24 think about X? And it will come up with a point of view based on the data reservoir. And that's a pretty remarkable, that's been the holy grail that nobody has achieved. And we literally are on the precipice of being able to achieve that. And the infrastructure is such where you don't have to, the technology can functionally be bolted on, which now creates this, all those projects that you've got are now the asset moving forward, as opposed to having to have them all scripted and constructed and et cetera, et cetera. So
and why ask? I mean, the opportunity from a brand side standpoint is, let's face it, a lot of our business is waste, right? We ask a lot of the same questions over and over again for 1,000 different reasons. The brands recognize that. They don't like it. They'd rather just ask the questions that they don't have the answers to. And often the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, especially in big global like P&G, right? So the opportunity to get to that point where their research process can truly be agile and iterative across the entire organization, right? And only explore things that they don't have the answer to, or explore new dimensions of that, because there's this massive body of information sitting there. That's exciting. I mean, whether it's the research industry or not, that ability to move past just trying to mine information, past information, and to actually start exploring new things that we haven't gotten to because we've just been stuck in the process of data structure and taxonomy and that just that whole pain in the butt that occurs. That's really, really cool.
Right. I think that makes sense. And I think it's probably one of the positive implications of it as well, in that if it frees up time to do the kind of menial tasks, then it opens up more creativity for the researcher as well. Viv, I know obviously we have a knowledge management platform. How are you thinking about ChatGPT in relation to that?
It goes to like Jamin's like knowledge reservoir, kind of like, or data reservoir kind of model that he's talking about, is like where multiple technologies that you can query across multiple platforms and technologies. So that's what is going to be that's kind of that definitely is part of something that that we'll all get to realistically, right? I think that is a definite win for the client realistically. At the end of the day, like if this becomes the common kind of lexicon / kind of storage in a different way, right? Like, okay, look, anything that Jamin learns through a focus group and anything that I learn on a survey has a commonality now, right? Has like maybe you put both of them into a kind of an AI repository, obviously, right? So and then you can query that AI repository. Like that's let's assume that that's the underlying kind of tech model. Now that's a huge win, obviously, right? So like now that's a direct win instead of like it's very difficult to kind of combine like different tools, technologies all into a common data format, which is almost nearly, I mean, that's why it's not happened so far, because the common data format does not exist. There is no common data format. But with something like ChatGPT, you can pump in data into it, say like, and the common data format is frankly text at this point. Like you can pump in like, hey, this is all the things I learned from a survey. This is all the things I learned from running a focus group. Let's just take a simple, let me kind of simplify that example. Like Jamin can put the focus group into the chat into the kind of findings of ChatGPT, and and QuestionPro can put the findings of the survey into ChatGPT, and then that thing is queryable by anybody. And I think that the real kind of like smart innovation really is that the query interface is a chat interface, which is a more human conversational interface. Realistically, it's not a search interface, but it's a chat interface. Let's put it that way. So that there is definitely something to that with respect to kind of like adoption, and that's why people are a little bit more excited. Is like it's more like the query interface itself is kind of like not a search bar but a chat bar. So there is a kind of shift over there, kind of material shift that I think that's also playing a part.
Well, how far away are we from the technology actually formulating the questions in real time? So, think about Remesh, for example, right? I mean, they utilize AI to be able to do 1,000 interviews at once, but it's still the human that is composing the question, right? It is still a moderator, or the things like that. Andrew Reed's been doing with Rival Tech, right? There's still a human moderation component there. But I certainly think that we're getting close now to where we could deploy a bot, for all intents and purposes, that could drive an awful lot of that with a human still having the ability. It's like a driverless car, right? You still be able to get your hands on the wheel. Yeah, how far away are we from that? Because I have not seen an example of a bot-driven conversation yet that was not just a really painful experience. It was obviously a bot. But my sense is that could change literally any minute, where we see something that really does manage the process.
But I think that's a little bit what like ChatGPT does, right? It feels different than a normal chatbot. So maybe it's closer than we think. I don't know. That's one of my questions and takes, I think. But to that point, I want to kind of shift it. We talked about data quality and and chatbots and using the negative implications in data collection. What outside of chatbots and surveys? What are some of the negative implications that you guys can think of or see that researchers should be on the lookout for?
I think you will. There's still a lot of plagiarism, we'll call it that, in the world, and I think you're going to see, there's a subset in any industry of people that are just, lazy. I'm lazy, but you've got to, and so the temptation is going to be for people just to like put it in the system and then just copy and paste it into their presentation, and that's thinking that's the gospel. And so I think, probably one of the darker components of this whole thing is, and this has, been a headline now for the last 3 or 4 years, is that the algorithms are in a lot of ways responsible for how we view the world and how we view data. And so those biases and prejudices are naturally going to find their way into these systems as well. And so there is an inherent danger to just doing the copy paste without applying the actual like research expertise on top, to try to eliminate as much of that as possible when you're expressing a population's point of view.
Yeah, and I think take that to kind of even a broader, let's say a exploratory research standpoint on any given topic. We're seeing such an immense fragmentation in media channels at this point, but yet a huge, and I think a good push of expert-led, very niche content through platforms like Substack, right? I mean, I'm a huge Substack fan. But Medium, WordPress, et cetera, and I think the flip side. So it's great that there's so much opportunity to explore different topics in a very deep way through this creator economy that we have emerging, whether it be YouTube or Substack or whatever, right? Podcasts, and there's so much content on topics that needs to be curated, right? There's a lot of great stuff out there, but it also, this fragmentation, there is no central point of truth anymore. And that can create a lot of opportunity for, I think, a lot of confusion. And to your point, Jamin, I think we're living through it, right? For good or ill in many ways right now. And it'll be interesting to see how this technology is deployed to make that better or make it worse. And my sense is that it's probably going to make it worse before it makes it better. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, the key question is, do algorithms have ethics? So don't know. It's an open question. I don't know the answer to that question actually. So and that drives conversation, like to Jamin's point. The one thing I do want to kind of quickly kind of switch gears, maybe even mention, like a couple of years ago, it was like chat-based interface for customer service, and the automation of that was, even today probably a lot of people automate it. I don't think that has actually taken off. I think there's a lot of frustration. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think that's taken off. Like in a sense that what was promised, like, look, you know what, you don't need customer service guys anymore. Like, look, the whole thing is, every time you go, it'll somehow figure out what you want. And I think there's like some case studies around like 97% of the people are just hitting 0 on the first time going into a chat, like trying to figure out person. The first thing they know that everybody's hacked it. Like you go to this particular chatbot, if you type the word person in, then it automatically then redirects to a real human being, and then of course you talk to the real human being, really, right? I think that the holy grail of like, look, you can actually ask your bank a question, your whatever, or if you're trying to reschedule your flight, ask a question, and then that human computer interaction over there clearly, at least so far, has not worked. And I'm not sure that ChatGPT really solves that. Frankly, I don't think that it may solve it. I don't know, but at least so far that particular that particular construct hasn't worked so far, at least. So that's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of a, I would probably say, like, with respect to the promise to the delivery. The promise was that, like, look, you don't need to have customer service anymore and all that stuff, but the delivery has been like, yeah, you still, a lot of things still need customer service effectively.
Yeah, great. I mean, it's only as good as the input, right? I mean, garbage in, garbage out. So, yeah. So, and they can read FAQs. I don't think that change, to your point, that's it's still going to be the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the reason I'm on the conversation is, like, I've read through the FAQs, I can't find the answer. So, like,
right.
If I can read the FAQs again, I mean, again, it's not going to solve the problem anyway. So.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things about ChatGPT too is you can get the response back, but then you can ask it to refine the answer as well to be more specific here or there. So that's pretty amazing in that regard. Some questions have come in that I think I do want to take a little bit of time to answer, or have you guys take a look at some of these audience questions here. I think, Mackenzie Lawton brings up a good point here in that, knowledge doesn't go beyond 2021 right now. How does that affect quality output, or how do you think about using it within the MR space? If it, obviously it ends at 2021 there. So what do you guys think about this question? Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I did some interviews on the topic of longitudinal studies. This is with, like, head of insights for Ipsos and Kantar and some other individuals, and quite literally, like, post pandemic, the comparability across normalized data sets completely changed. So, like, anyway, on a variety of topics. And so I think that was a material issue, and is probably a little bit less material today in the context of how radically our world has completely changed from what we care about to where we spend our time to how we do what we do. The other part of it is, I would, it used to be the case, like 70% of research was longitudinal in nature, and now it's flipped. And so a lot more is ad hoc than it used to be, and a lot more is being done DIY. And so, to that end, the frameworks, I think, are much more in context of, primary market research being gathered today and analyzing that data in the context of that data set, as opposed to pulling from historical points of view. So, yeah, I think definitely an important question, but in relative to market research is less important than, generally speaking, than historically.
Well, it does bring up an interesting opportunity for innovation, though. So what does it look like when you combine this technology with other predictive technologies? So, or even, kind of existing algorithms, let's say, causal analysis or, Bayes type of analyses. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity to take the historical information and shift it on its head to be more predictive. Now, to get to your point, norms. we're still developing whole new norms now, but it is interesting to think about those types of ideas on how you can amass information and query it, and then combine that with something that says, okay, now what happens next? Because that's what everybody wants to know, especially brands. What happens next?
And from a research methodology perspective, we of course do that today, leveraging regression, where we take stated purchase intent and compare it to similar purchase intent or historical purchase to like products, and then that gives us the weighted probability of that outcome. By the way, I talked with a researcher yesterday who used ChatGPT to create their partial factorial design on a max diff. So, like, again, just crazy.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. But Lenny, to your point, like, if you could feed that data in and you could say, what is the how accurate, or how should I reweight the expected outcome of this thing based on this other data, that's feasible now.
Interesting. Question here from David Boyle, David Boyle, I read one of he has a good ebook on ChatGPT. Just a quick plug there for David. But he also, do you see ChatGPT as a threat because clients can do more by themselves, or as a superpower to help deliver for clients, or some combination? Viv, what do you think? Is it a superpower here?
I think it's a superpower. It's not as big as the internet. Let me be, so, okay,
Viv, just real quick, it did have 1 million users in 5 days, right? So isn't that that's some sort of record? But.
Fair enough. I don't think the internet had 1 million users in 5 days. Okay, fair enough. Right? When it launched. Okay, all right.
No.
Jamin wins. Okay, fine. Jamin wins. Okay, we'll live to fight another day, Jamin. All right, keep the battle on. No, I think it's a superpower. Really, I think it's a massive, efficiency accelerant. At a minimum, it's a massive efficiency accelerant. And it could be more than that, but at a minimum, I think it's at a floor level. It's it just improves efficiency by an exponential amount.
I'll throw this out to you guys, just thinking out loud. We've got IEX coming up in the spring in Austin, and it would be cool to maybe put in a kind of a hackathon, if you will, some type of component, just to get in and brainstorm on these types of ideas. How do we deploy this technology and do that? Because I agree, it's a superpower. Like all superpowers, it can also be used for evil. All
right, Lenny, I'll sponsor it. I'll pay for it.
All right, you heard it, guys. All right. We're locking it in, Vin.
You gotta tighten those first
whoever wins, I guess. As long as it's not Jamin, that's it. As long as it's not Jamin, I'll do it.
Wait a minute. Anyways, we'll talk offline about this, Lenny, but I think I might have a better sponsor.
Nice.
Lenny will play me and Jamin against each other for getting. He's gonna get more cash.
Vivek always wins.
Money talks, guys. No, set that aside. But the opportunity for innovation around this, and it really is probably something that as an industry we need to get a handle on, just like we focused on sample quality, et cetera, et cetera. It's probably something there needs to be a working group in some form or fashion to start exploring these things, because it does have immense applications for good, and it could also have immense applications for not so good, as you're already seeing. So
right. It's funny. I think the efficiency. I think right now I kind of think it might be making researchers less efficient, because now they're just plugging in a bunch of things in ChatGPT to figure out what they can do. But I think in the end, it will make it more efficient once people realize, like, oh, these are all the things I can do with it. So, to your point, Lynn, I think it's great that we have sort of this think tank or all these different things. Like, this is what we can use ChatGPT for, and then in the end, I think it will be way more efficient. So, one question here came in from Adrian. Have you considered adding well, I guess we can't add, but have we considered adding a feature using ChatGPT to identify in real time the quality of open-ended questions? So on a scale from 0 to 10, to what extent the answer below answers the prompt? So I guess using it to kind of say, is this a good question or not? So I think we kind of thought about this, Viv, but in terms of creating a survey and asking questions, but I don't know. This is a use case that I initially thought of, but maybe you can speak to that.
No, it's smart, like to figure out if the answer actually answers the question in the survey. If that's I haven't thought about it. It's it should be part of the hackathon. That's why, Lenny. That's why I'm gonna. If Jamin doesn't undercut me,
you can buy and sell me all day long, Vivek. Give me a break.
But it'd be interesting for that to happen in real time.
Yeah.
To push back of what? Oh, I'm sorry, you just put in gobbledygook. So actually, please answer the question correctly. Put a little more thought into it. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's take one more question and then we can wrap this up. So Jack has a question here, different take on the topic. We see panel quality as a large point of concern in the industry. Do you foresee AI bot panels and the general integrity of panels being threatened by this or similar technologies?
Well,
it's like doping in the in whether it's the Olympics or anywhere else. I mean, the money's always in the dope. It's never in the solution, and that's why the solution's always behind. Right? We're always trying to catch up. Testing's always trying to catch up, And so, I think the challenge is, for here is it would not be hard for the 3 or 4 of us to, and for probably for hundreds of dollars, put together a GPT-based survey bot. And so, which is a little bit terrifying. So yeah, I think it's gonna be a big problem.
Yeah, but but here's the thing that I've been arguing for quite some time, that this isn't just everything that Jam said is true. It already exists. We by some measures, up to 30% of sample that comes through the traditional panel supply is bad, is bullshit, is bots. It just is. So and that's being dealt with through the existing solutions that we have around panel quality. But the real opportunity, I think, is to change the paradigm of the research process. If we can engage real humans in real conversations in real time, then it won't be so easy to spoof these things, right? A survey is pretty easy to spoof, just like a click farm. It's easy. It's easy to do. Conversation's different. And so I would argue that we have an engagement problem. We don't have a supply problem. We have an engagement problem. If we can engage in a better experience with respondents, that's more holistic, that's more iterative, that is more natural, then that will go far towards addressing these types of issues.
Lenny, I think there's a kind of interesting case study. We were working with Epic Games, I think, and we talked about an interesting way of in-game, just changing the survey from being a survey to being a conversational interface. And we have a model where we can say, instead of asking, fundamentally we're doing the same thing. We're still asking the questions, but the form factor, instead of being a survey form factor, let's say it's a conversational form factor, which is like a question answer through that process. And we all thought that would have that, and then it did yield better kind of engagement and response rates, literally, right? Because just the form factor, literally the on back end didn't change, the research model didn't change, we still did max diff and all that stuff, but the form factor that we used was, as opposed to click, 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 it's ask, response, and then that was a better clearly a better a use case, as well as a better ultimately a better engagement model, without sacrificing the back end, literally. So that's where you get into all these arguments if you can sacrifice the back end, you don't do these, you don't have to do this. But a lot of times you cannot sacrifice the back end. Let's assume that let's not argue the hypothesis anymore. You cannot sacrifice the back end. So what else can you do at that point? And then I think that having that engagement piece in there, and there are kind of innovations in terms of how you what different form factors you can use, because people are more used to doing that. Same thing with Jamin has done, with videos, people are used to doing videos. So it may not have worked 10 years ago, honestly. People were not as comfortable with taking selfies and posting it online, and Instagram wasn't there, obviously, but today it's clearly it's there. So there's also the social aspect to it, really. So you can do that. So yeah, so those are kind of random thoughts, at least.
Cool. Well, it's probably a good place to wrap it up here, gentlemen. Thank you, Viv, Lenny, Jamin. Appreciate you guys coming on today, and until next time, thanks everyone for joining. If we didn't get to your questions, we'll be sure to answer them after this. But with that, we'll wrap it up for today. Thanks, guys.
Bye,
I still love you, Jamin.